and the thing that we also talked about briefly before we recorded that, and this is maybe something you might be able to talk to a little bit more than I can, but I've learned that with neurodivergence comes a higher incidence of gender divergence, or at least gender expression, gender identity divergence. And that kind of makes sense too when you think about it, because your brain is wired differently, so you don't perceive the world the same way. And so when someone's trying to enforce a gender norm on you, it's less likely for it to be accepted and to be acceptable. And this is something that like people in the trans community are concerned about, because obviously like people already want to like, cure autism, and people want to cure trans and cure gays. And so like the more that this stuff kind of gets like tied and linked together, the more ammunition it might be for like bigots and stuff. And do you have any kind of greater thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, so and I've actually like made a video about this subject and then deleted it and then remade it, and like I've been thinking about it for a long time of how to word it, but basically like my idea is like, linking the two things can be ammunition for bigots, basically. And even some of the articles that I've read, the language that they use makes me cringe a little bit, because it's almost like, pathologizing both ADHD, autism, and being queer. And that's just a really icky feeling. But then I also think that knowledge is power. I think that knowing things is always a good thing. I always want to learn. I always want to know where the connections are, if there are connections. So when I've started reading these papers that are showing this connection, I was just excited. And also I was like, oh, this also applies to me. So I'm excited because I see myself in this research. But I think like, while it might be ammunition for bigots, it's also ammunition for us, because we've already decided as a society in the DSM being gay is no longer a mental health disorder. So maybe if we're linking autism and ADHD to being gay, being queer, having gender divergence, then maybe that will also depathologize ADHD and autism a little bit, because we've already decided that being gay and being trans is not a pathology, is not a mental health disorder. So maybe down the road, we're going to see neurodivergence in a similar way, hopefully.
I never actually thought about it like that, and that is encouraging to think about, for sure. And I don't know how like involved you are with the trans community necessarily, but I know it's a bit of a running joke from my experience to be like, oh, you're trans and you're not autistic, or like, you're trans and you're like not queer, and it's kind of almost like funny in a way that it's like such a common thing. And I don't know if you have experienced much of that yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting that people within the community seem to realize these patterns and connections almost before the research catches up. And having my foot in, because I'm in this kind of like weird middle ground where I'm not quite a clinician yet, but also I follow a lot of like therapists and psychologists and stuff on TikTok, so I hear what they're saying too, and they're very worried about like the language that people use, and like not portraying things that are not yet like confirmed with research. Like we have a few studies here and there hinting at this, but like, oh, we don't know for sure yet. But like the communities kind of know. When like when you're in the community and when you're seeing the patterns over and over and over again, the research is really just like the confirmation of that pattern that we've all been seeing. And research is very important, and I'm very to see where the research goes on this, but I will not be surprised when we see more and more research saying that, yes, this is a pattern.